Hey y'all, it's your co-host Yogi Rich introducing episode 9 of One Answer Yoga. What is self-defense? We really emphasize the maternal instinct to protect their young, the paternal instinct to protect the clan, and how that manifests in all of us, regardless of male or female, and how that might magnify on a societal scale, say the military, the police force, the different things like that. We also address how our current system might be imbalanced in those areas, sort of talking about like the maternal and paternal instinct. We also like drift our conversation into the fluidity of sexuality and sexual identification. We talk about some things with trans, we talk about history, we talk about a whole bunch of different stuff. This episode is sort of all over the place, and we had like some major technical difficulties putting this episode together. You may or might not find some areas a little bit out of sync, so please just bear with us. We ask for your forgiveness. Please leave any comments or questions or concerns in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. So, without any further ado, please enjoy episode 9 of One Answer Yoga. One love. Peace.
We were a little delayed there. We were looking at Quentin's nice shirt today.
Oh my goodness. It's like, yeah, I'm switching it up, you know. And you know, Mercury's in retrogrades. I think I told you before. I was like, it always hits me kind of harder. It's
Yeah.
probably partially like placebo or whatever, but um, yeah, things have been like interesting when it comes to communication and
Mm.
life and all that good stuff, and even my practice. You know, I feel like in retrograde too, my practice gets a little disrupted, so it gives me an opportunity to roll with the punches a little bit more. And
What's in your chart you think that allows Mercury to have such a big effect on you?
well, yeah, so I'm an Aries sun and my Mercury's also in Aries. And
Yeah.
yeah,
A lot of
so
fire, right? Isn't Aries fire?
yeah,
Aries
I
fire?
have like 5 of my 7 major planets are fire. Yeah.
That's so funny because you're so chill.
Well, the thing is I'm a Taurus rising and I'm a Virgo moon, so I have like Earth that helps balance that out. And then my midheaven is in Aquarius, so it's more like air based.
Uh,
And but I'm very excitable, like, you know, and I would say I'm more of a physical person. Like, you know, if you're around me, you'll see like yeah, you'll notice my energy is like I always say to my homies, I'm like, if you're around me, you're gonna get a workout. Like we're gonna be moving fast, we're gonna be going uphill, and we're gonna be doing like kind of scary things. So yeah,
I have bouts
yeah.
of that. I'm a Cancer, but
Mm.
I think I've got some Leo up in there that gives me a little spice.
I
Makes me a
see
little
it.
spicier than a normal Cancer would be. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that combination. Like Safa's birthday is the 24th, right? So she just turned
Mhm.
30. And so she's a like a Leo, but she's very close to Cancer, and she's also a Leo rising. My mom's my sister is a Leo, and then my dad's daughter is a Cancer. Um, so you definitely, I think that's the part of the reason why I like you so much too, is that like you you remind me so much, and I like fiercity. My dog Kimber, her birthday's 8/8, and
Kimber's
yeah,
got some fiercity in her.
she's fierce. Yeah, so I'm like,
Yeah.
I like to be surrounded by fierce women. And you know, okay, so that will kind of like that's a little bit of a segue of a thought that I have. Um, earlier on before we had our conversation about pain, I was thinking like, what's self-defense, and like let's kind of like wrestle with this. But then I was like watching nature videos. Like I'm trying to purify my Discovery Channel from all of the ass crack. So I'm just like I need wholesome things that I like. So I'm looking at the like you know just people out in the wild and like being reminded of the maternal instinct of aggression towards like protecting cubs. And like I've been around a lot of Leos and Cancers, and like in specific, that energy is very like just prominent in those two charts, in those two signs. Um, and I was just thinking to myself, like, it's probably a little bit more complex in humans than it is in like just basic mammals. Because I'm like, obviously, I'm imagining in myself like I'm sure that there's an instinct for the father bear or whatever to protect the cubs, but if it's just the mother bear, they're typically like we were talking about before, like the mother might like focus on the children,
Yeah.
even in these different like arrangements of life. Like, yeah, there's very little tolerance. Like the tolerance level shrinks dramatically because the risk is so great, assumed. And I was thinking to myself, I'm like, I think like human beings probably have that to just anything that we feel stewardship towards,
Yeah.
like large or small, like whether you're man or female, we have that like that's like the feminine side of us, that like that nurturing, that like wanting to take care of, and then protecting that with which we're taken care of, and how like that system might be like hijacked or like might be kind of overrunning, and like we're talking about relationships before, and like
Mm.
how you're protecting what you think is yours, and you're using that like maternal aggression, quote unquote, instinct part of us to defend it. And it's like the mom is never wrong in that position. Like that's kind of the difficulty. It's like, it's like you might just be peacefully walking by like the mountain lion cub, but it does not matter.
Mm-mm.
It doesn't actually make sense. Like it doesn't have to make sense. It's beyond that. It's just like you're too close. I'm threatening you now. And if you
Yeah.
continue to aggress, then I'll have to harm you. And I think that is like what makes domestic abuse and domestic like so difficult and so tense and so coarse. I feel like is could be a part of that like quote unquote maternal instinct to protect what we feel like is ours. So what do you think? I don't know. That was just something that was on my mind.
When you say domestic abuse, are you talking about like when a mom abuses children or when like
Ooh,
mom is
I
being
wouldn't even say so. I would say both, but I don't. Domestic abuse is a strong word. I'll just say like tension. So like tension within the family. I'm thinking like maybe that's caused by added on to that element of the psyche where you know like you might have disagreements of like for me particularly like I only have dogs, like we might have disagreement about how we're going to treat the dogs or whatever, and now it's like you're threatening my dog, like you're threatening my child, and now that's a problem that that's a big problem. Or it could be like you know so, and then also the child might be threatening themselves, and that might be leading you to like beat them, for example, where it's like you're threatening your own life, like you're mine, or like you're, and I don't even want to say mine because some people do have that point of view. Some parents also like yours, they probably felt more stewardship or like, we're trying to like cultivate these souls and help them manifest. But either way, I'm sure that fight would be in them to where it's like, hey, I need to make sure that this quality that I see arising in the mind, I need to make sure that I let you know that can't be there. And I'll use fiercity or tension or whatever to remove it. So I know that there's times to do it and there's appropriate times to do it. But I do think obviously like with all the things that we do, like we can be a little excessive in that direction. So yeah, that's what I mean about like maybe not abuse, but like tension, conflict. It can lead to abuse, obviously, but just like
yeah.
that foundational groundwork.
It's interesting. I mean, my mom is a fierce, fierce mama bear. She was definitely like a protector of her cubs in all ways and still is.
Mm.
Uh, Somebody upset me recently, and my mother was like, "Do you want me to go burn their house down?" Totally joking, but I was like, "That is my mom. Like,
Yeah.
she's 80, I'm 53. She's ready to go
Mm,
burn somebody's house down for me." Um,
mm,
and at the same time, yeah, I think like when your cubs are not behaving the way that you want them to, right? There's a fierceness also of like, my mother, we kind of tease her now.
mm,
Uh, but obviously as kids it was a little traumatic. She would pinch our arms in public. So like if we
mm,
weren't behaving, she wouldn't scold us. She wouldn't say anything. She'd just go and pinch the bottom of our arm. Have you ever
mm.
had
Yeah,
your arm pinched before? It is not a fun experience.
it hurts. Absolutely.
But that was part of, I think, her, first of all, she had 6 kids, so she had to keep us in line.
Mm.
Like you cannot have six children running rampant and crazy and not having, because my mom also didn't keep us at home. She took us out. We traveled. We
Yeah.
went to different places. She was not like the kind of mom that just is like, I'm going to raise my six kids on my homestead and that's just where they're going to be. She was definitely like my kids are going to go to the movies. They're going to go to restaurants. They're going to travel. They're going to do all these things. So that was her way of being like, I'm not going to scream at you in public, but you're going to know when you are not in alignment with what my
Hmm.
expectation is of how you're going to behave in public. She used to, when we were little, she'd let us sit down. And there was this really fancy restaurant in Denver, actually. I think it might still be there, and I wish I could remember the name of it.
Mm.
Um,
I was ready to look it up.
I know, I wish I could remember the name because I don't remember the name of that one. It was something like Elmo's or something like, it had a funny name like that.
Mm.
Anyway, it was this really fancy restaurant. And so when we were young, sitting around the dinner table, first of all, our dinner table had no legs. My mom would cut the legs off of our tables all the time, so we'd sit on the floor.
Mm.
So to
Mm.
keep us from being like complete, crazy kids just rolling
Mm.
around on the floor while we're eating dinner, she would pretend like we were going to this. I'm going to say Elmo's because I think it was something kind of like that.
Yeah. Like a
So
fancy
she would
spot.
pretend we were going to a fancy dinner, and she'd make us all pretend like we were at Elmo's eating dinner. And my grandfather was in professional baseball, so sometimes they would go to this restaurant that was really fancy and had all the silverware and all that kind of stuff. So she'd make us pretend like we were eating at this place, which is totally. I'm sorry, I'm so not focused on this story right now because, as I was talking about restaurants in Denver, I remember we
Mm.
used to go to this place called Casa Bonita, which you and Sasha
Yeah.
check
Yeah.
out if you haven't
Yeah,
been
we've
there
heard
yet.
of it. We've heard of it. We've driven past it.
Oh my
The
God.
pink place. Yeah. Oh
They
my
used to have
goodness.
like cave divers that would dive off the like cliff and
Yeah.
cliff divers and they drive into this pool and like as a
It
kid
is
Casa
dramatic.
Bonita was just the most I mean
Yeah.
did on me. I would love to go back there one day. Maybe when we come visit, that's where we'll go is we'll go to Casa Bonita. But
Can
anyway,
I pause? Well, I was gonna say like this is like that spot like that. There's a new spot called Meow Wolf. Like there's places like that are only around here that are like so out there, but like all about fun. Yeah.
and this place has been there since, I was a kid. I mean, Casa Bonita's got to be like 50 years old now at least.
Yeah.
Probably
Yeah.
older because probably it started back in like the 40s or 30s or I don't know, something. Like it was not, you could tell it was not like something that probably got created in the 70s, but we'll have to look up the history of Casa Bonita.
Mm.
Um, but anyway, I
Yeah.
digress this morning.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think that instinct to protect, like I know that I'm very protective of Henson. If other people try to like correct him, do training stuff. I mean, obviously he's also a service dog, so I'm very
Mm.
specific about who he interacts with because it's important that he bonds only with me. But that
100%.
natural instinct to be protective of your young, I think is like, I mean, I'm very protective. I don't have children myself, but I'm very protective of other children. Very
Mm.
protective. Like even in my family, if my siblings, their parents are being a little overly something, much to my siblings' dismay,
Mm.
I'll be like, "Hey, they're a kid. Like, come on, let's remember they're children, and they
Mm.
don't have it all together, and they don't have all the things." And so, I see what you're saying about being protective, and then I wonder how that translates then, like you said, onto a bigger scale.
Mm.
I think that's kind of, I mean, I
Hmm.
just want to say again, just in case you guys didn't realize it, I'm not a fan of our current president. However, I'm not full of hatred. I can at least see like, okay, there's things he's doing and I understand why he's doing it. And I see that it resonates with a lot of Americans. I didn't like him before he was president. So it has nothing to do with his presidency in some ways. I didn't like him 30 years ago when I lived in New York and he was building Trump Towers and all that.
Mm.
Um, but I think there's a certain protectivism, like that protection factor of like, protecting our own resources, protecting our own space, protecting our own stuff that does come a little bit from that. I also wonder, like, I mean, I know that in nature that mothers are so protective. Like, like a bear is pretty fine. Like we have bears around here all the time, and a bear's fine until. But if you see a bear cub, you're like, mm-mm,
I'm
get
scared.
out of here.
Yeah.
Time to hightail it out of here because you definitely don't want to mess with the mama bear.
Mm,
But I also think that protectionism always comes from a sense of I, me, mine. And in yoga, that's always what we're trying to be mindful of is that I, me, mine. Um, and so I wonder, we see it in nature. It's natural. Obviously, we're animals. We're going to exhibit a lot of that. And I think a mother's protectiveness of her children, honestly, is incredible because I feel like there's a lot of horrible things that could have happened to me as a kid,
mm,
that did not happen to me because my mother was so protective.
mm.
My mom watched over us and made sure that nobody was messing with her cubs. And so I feel like that's a really powerful thing, but I also feel like
Mm.
when taken too far, it can be that can be a challenge. Although it's funny because, even Swami Satchidananda, he used to always refer to us as his angels. So the kids, he'd always say, my angels. And he'd even emphasize the my being a little bit ironic, I think, or funny about it.
Mm.
But even in him, he always was very possessive of us in the sense of like protective. He was incredibly protective of us. Like
Mhm.
he did not want anything to harm us. And I was um
Mm.
talking with one of our teachers, one of the teachers that taught in preschool, and she lives just down the road, Karuna Binstock. And so I was talking to her the other day, and she was saying that one time Guru had up them down really, really early on. And when he sat them down, the teachers, all of them that were going to teach us, and this was probably, again, like we were maybe preschool, first grade.
Mm.
And he said, don't you dare project your stuff onto these children. Like these children are blank, beautiful slates. Don't you dare bring your samskaras or your basically like your shit into this
Mm.
space and
Mm.
project it onto these kids.
Mm.
So here's an enlightened being who
Mm.
also, that was still one of the human
Mm.
manifestations, even though he was enlightened. I say there's also still a lot of humanity. As long as we're in a human form, we got to be human, right? And so that was one of the human things. And I think that even many enlightened gurus or beings. Look at Amma. She's very much mother energy. She's
Mm.
very much that protective mama. I mean, literally all she does is hug people all day long. What could be more mama than I'm
Yeah.
just going to hug everybody all day long? And protective, right? Like a hug is such a protective thing. It's like, sorry, I'm so animated today.
Oh yeah, it's okay. Let's get it.
Like hitting
It's
my mic.
Leo.
Imagine like a hug is so protective. It's like literally wrapping your arms around someone and keeping them within that safe sphere of your arms. And like when something, if there's some sort of attack or a building is falling, whether it's an earthquake or a mass shooting or Pompeii, the Vesuvius exploding, we
Yeah.
have throughout history people protecting others with their arms, like wrapping their arms around them
Mm.
in a protective manner to try to keep them safe. And so isn't that kind of what Amma's
Mm.
doing on like a mass global scale? Like I'm going to put my arms around every single person I possibly can.
Mm.
That's
That's
crazy.
interesting. I mean, what's interesting about, okay, so I mean, there's a lot of different things there. So let's put it this way. It's like, you have like I have two dogs. So I have Kimber, who is a female, Akita, and Toph, who's a male. Like I'm not gonna say they speak for all of them, but stereotypically male dogs pee a lot more and they try to mark like broader areas around the space. And like, you know, I agree with you, like switching topics a little bit, like I'm not a partisan. Like I kind of think it's kind of like corny. To me, it's a distraction from the fact that like partisanship or like just this versus that makes it feel like they're not the same whole. It's almost like having a quarter and then debating on which side pays for things. And it's like, no, the whole quarter is what's being used to create whatever it is that you're talking about. And
Yeah, I
like
feel
to me,
like
it's
there's a lot of stuff that gets lost in this partisan. Like you're forgetting that
100%.
there's a whole group of people that actually have needs and you got
Really.
to take care of them, but you're so busy like separating out saying this person did this and this person did that that you're forgetting you got to like feed the masses even.
Yeah, 100%. And like but that's a reflection of the family. There's very much that energy in our household where, and I mean, even like the parties stereotypically, they represent like masculine and feminine energies within the household, say, for example, where it's like, hey, we need to be like, and and to me, it's like as I'm getting older and like obviously being married and like being in partnership with like dogs and stuff like that, it's like, no, these are like very much two halves at the same coin. So that paternal energy to protect is like, there can't be things in this territory that we don't know about. This is the territory. And ironically, I looked up Trump's chart, like just to see what I could find.
Yeah.
So he's a Cancer sun and he's a Leo rising, allegedly. So
Oh, that's
everything about
that's kind of like what I am.
everything about it makes sense because Leos, when threatened,
Maybe that's why I
if
don't
you
think so much.
no, to me, I mean, like, and you know, it's funny because like from my point of view, it's like it is what it is. Like to me, it makes sense that that energy would be the most prominent energy at this time, and it just is what it is. Like all my life, like think about what he does. Is like he builds hotels, you know, like in golf courses. Golf courses is the play part, hotels is like the housing unit part, and like that very much gives that energy. So of course, like I know what you're trying to say, like the exterior manifestation of that, like, you know, primal territorial instinct would be the border or the idea of like this is a house with a door. This yeah, this is an open forest, but this wolf pack doesn't agree with that. This wolf pack says this is the territory.
It
And
also
like so
explains why he's so territorial of his home,
100%.
right? Cancers are so home based, like our home environment is so important to us that
Yeah,
it kind of makes sense that like given the nature of his chart, especially if that chart becomes is not balanced out well with other things, that
100%.
could turn into like an incredible protectionism.
100%. And
But
un
when
and
it's done,
un
it's like one thing when you're doing it in your little home apartment, but it's a whole nother thing when it's being done on a global level and it's affecting, millions and billions of people.
yeah, because if it's at others' expense, and that's kind of the whole point where if you think doing things, and then we're talking about capitalism as a form of consumption. So if you are a supreme capitalist in your own mind, like we would say, like another way to look at that is like that could be cannibalistic towards our people. And so, but I say like but it's like it is what it is regardless. Like whatever it is, it is. So
Where we
this
sit
is
right now.
this is where we sit right now, and this is what we're thinking about, like the maternal, paternal, like, and we see it reflected within the family, within the self, um, and I don't know, like I've realized that like whenever we're like the reason why there is that aggression, that territory is just because we care about it. Like it comes from a good place. Like, you know, I've never had a partner like that has been comfortable with other girls around me. Like no matter how cool they are. Like, you know, like they might be kind of comfortable, but I'm just saying like there is still boundaries. Like and me, like personally, it's like, you know, you don't want there is this concept of territory because there is the reality of wickedness. There is the reality of like, you know, there are demons out there. Like as the Ramayana, for example, like Sita was in the little in her
Wait,
Rama got yeah.
I got to backtrack for a second.
What's
So
up? What's up?
what you're saying is the female energy you think is what has the woman not be comfortable with you having other women around you?
No, I'm just saying like that maternal protection and the protection because it's like, hey, this is I'm responsible for this. I haven't. I'll put it this way, like,
I bring it up to Quentin for a reason because my husband has
yeah,
a lot of female friends.
yeah. I mean,
And I don't have any problem with it at all. Like I
oh,
enjoy it.
yeah,
Like he goes out to dinner with them, he hangs out with them, he talks to them on the phone, he's
yeah,
shares personal stuff because I'm like, I can't be everything to you.
Yeah,
I'm
100%.
not everything. So I kind of just wonder where you're, what context we're talking about, because I do know a lot of women who have that same energy of like, I don't feel comfortable with that. And maybe I just have more masculine. I don't know. That's why I was kind of curious
Well,
about
it's
what you were
so
attributing it to, because I'm kind
I
of
got
like,
you.
where you
So
feel
yeah,
the feminine thing, and I don't have any energy around whether it's feminine or masculine, because I'm like, I am just what I am. But
oh, 100%. No, I don't think it's feminine or masculine because I was gonna say like me similarly, I'm not necessarily comfortable. Me personally, this is like the fire, and we're fire sign prominent, so it's like there also is like a little bit of like um water signs are very much like the energy is more like like communal infusion and flowing. Fire signs are a little bit different when it comes to certain things and um just by the archetype I should say. So for me it's like Kimber for example like it's like it's not nothing personal, it's just like it's just the natural disposition sometimes. And even though we can be optimistic about people and their intentions and all that kind of stuff, it's just like there might just be a little bit more of a rigid boundary because of the nature. And I was like, mainly in my life, it's like my mom was very much my mom was very much protective of how, when I had a girlfriend, how I would interact with my other female friends.
hmm,
And so maybe that's a part of it, and that's okay.
interesting.
But it's very much like you can't, because she's trying to protect them, from
Right.
her point of view. She's like, this is a 16-year-old boy, like he can't, 17, and I've always been a young guy, so there's probably that element too. But I'm not saying all the female friends, but I will just say like there is a filter. It's like if I'm introducing 10 people, they're going to be filtered down and be like, okay, I'm comfortable with 3, 4. That person I don't really like that much. I don't really like her, not because,
Yeah.
and that's kind of how I look at it. And I would say similarly where it's like, yeah, that guy's like, he's cool. That guy's giving you googly eyes and you might not notice it. And that doesn't, there's nothing against that person,
He has
but
that complaint all the time.
we're well versed in that, and like because and some dudes don't, and that's the thing. I
Yeah.
and just like, hey, so I think that that's what I kind of mean by that protection, because like to men it's sort of like, we don't want, we don't want a man to like, sleep with our wife, and then women it's more so like we don't want someone to like fall in love and like, get an emotional involvement with someone else. Sex is still important either way, but stereotypically, that's kind of like what we've been raised, and that's what it seems like in society is most important.
I think
So,
we have male and female energies, though, Quentin, that go back. I mean,
yeah.
Sanskrit arguably is one of the oldest written languages,
Mhm.
and mata pita, those are two words that exist in this ancient language. So this male, female, the manifest and unmanifest go back in history. So we know that there is male, female energy.
Ooh, we should start on that because I'm kind of assuming that that the audience has already been informed on that idea of the masculine feminine energy within all things, the force of creation, and then how, in certain positions, if you're talking, someone's listening. So the talker might be in the masculine position, but that doesn't mean that only men can speak. And I think, and even in religions, that esoteric meaning got stripped and it was sort of like used as a tool of like power and domination, but it never was meant to be that way, where it's like in
Yeah.
relation, and that's kind of, I'm sorry. Yeah, as I'm saying this, I'm realizing that like, yeah, I haven't really done that like precursor because to me it's like there's all of us have a territory that we want to protect, and we also have like a living thing that we want to protect, and that's kind of, you could say, protecting the territory, protecting the outer boundaries, that could be summarized by a masculine, but that could be within yourself, and then also like, but the the propensity to protect the living around you could be summarized or categorized as an other end of that spectrum. So you protect non-living things on one end of the spectrum, living things on the other end of the spectrum, and just for simplicity's sake, we say masculine and feminine. But we both know that like there are women that care a lot more about the material protection and men that care more about the life protection within a partnership.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that man is less masculine or feminine. This is just like a way to describe an expression of life rather
I know
than
that
like
like
box people down.
culturally that was these things were given certain, so like if you go back, right, okay, so like
Yeah.
unmanifest is considered to be the male energy, and then
Mm,
anything that's manifest is considered to be female energy. That's
mm,
what these ancient yoga teachings say. So anything you see, anything you're experiencing, everything on this realm, everything in this plane, everything that exists as we know it to exist has a feminine energy because femininity is that creation, right? Like the whole idea of creation is a feminine energy. So everything that's been created that God created, God unmanifest, whatever you want to call it, created, has got to be a feminine energy. Then, of course, we have physical aspects of our male, female. Of course, now we're in a time where gender is very much things that we had assumptions around for millennia, we no longer have assumptions around because now you can literally change your physical gender and all the characteristics of your physicality to match whatever's going on inside of you. And so, for me, I have two trans nephews, and it's extraordinary to watch them change from a feminine dominated hormonal energy to a
Mm-hmm.
masculine dominated hormonal energy and how that has shifted them um, personality wise, expectation wise. So we talk a lot about like my nephew Van, we talk a lot about cultural impacts of what's expected of him from a female to a male energy. And it's pretty fascinating. Like one thing he said was like, now being a man, nobody has any expectations of him. If someone says something in a room and he just doesn't respond, he said there's very little expectation. He said
Mm.
nobody expects him to like get up and do things also. Like if someone's like, "Hey, can someone get up and, vacuum the living room?" He said it's weird because like he would not be the first person that society would turn to do that anymore. Whereas before
Mm.
there was always like this expectation as a woman that he was going to get up and like fix whatever issues were happening.
Mm.
And so his observations, and he's such an analytical person. It's really fun because
Mm.
he does really analyze and look at like the cultural aspects of what that means. So now suddenly our female and male ideas are really merging, right? Like we've always known that people could be fluid and you could be in a feminine body but have more masculine traits, or you could be in a masculine body have more feminine traits. But now I think what's making people really uncomfortable is this fact that it's all just flowing and people
Mm.
no longer know. And then, of course, somebody said it, really very clearly the other day was that, um, and I do think there's some truth under this, was that one of the biggest issues with transgender is that particularly straight men are afraid that they're going to fall in love with a transgender woman and somehow be tricked into. That's really like the source of the fear because otherwise, why do you care? What difference does it make to
Yeah.
you what gender somebody is? But if you think you're going to be somehow tricked into being attracted to somebody, and that's what it feels
That's
like
it.
with them.
Wow, that is so everything you just oh my goodness, oh my goodness. Okay, there are so many open things right now that
I'll try to be
like
quiet for a moment so we can
no no
close the loop on
no
that
no,
alone.
it's okay. We got a little how's your back feeling today, by the way, before like dive
Back is
deeper?
much better, thank God. Yoga
Yeah, oh my
works.
goodness. Yeah, I was
Just
gonna
in
say
case
my
any of
rib
you
cage.
are wondering, all those things we told you about last week,
Hmm.
fantastic. It's feeling much better
Yes.
today. I go to the chiropractor again tomorrow, so we're getting this hip straight, making sure I don't have to have hip surgery anytime in the near future.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, good. That's good to hear because similar, I'm feeling better, and I was like, okay, before we get into like this, I was like, this one might be a longer one because this is like what I love all of this so much because and this is why like I know I'm gonna say this a lot and I'm trying not to be like make this like a trope, but to me it really does feel like, and especially just because of how I was raised and how my other like black friends were raised, we were raised a little bit different. Like black males, and you were talking earlier about like punishing kids. So like for me, I would get punished for not being proactively a good person. So if somebody needed help, if somebody was because my mom was like, they were also hyper vigilant of the fact that like of how people might perceive us. So like people are going to expect you to not do anything. People are going to expect you to be lazy. People are going to expect you to like do these things. So like I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen and that that's not going to be my son. And so like I just remember like Tom getting smacked like in the back of the head like every now and then like or like just having a stern talking to just as a reminder like take care of your mother, take care of your sister, take care of that person, take care of your brother, take care of these people like take go out of your way to help people like don't be the last one like don't be the last one in the room to be like don't be useless. Try to always be useful in every situation that you're in. And like it was very much like you're kind of pushed into activity to do, to do, and to do. And I remember like I had a cousin who's Leo, and he'd be like, "Why would I do that?" Because he was a little bit less obedient than I was, and he was just like, "I'm trying to play. I'm not trying to make sure like this person's taken care of and that's taken care of. Like, I don't need to do that." And I remember being like, "That is crazy to like even think about that." But from the example I have from my father, was like, oh, if you needed help or if anything was going on in the room, if there's any physical task that had to be done, it was expected that the men hopped up and did it. And that's kind of like so what I always when I think about like so I just moved to Denver and Safa works at a vegan cafe slash apothecary slash yoga studio slash guard sauna and and
What's the name of it? Let's give a little
it's
shout
called
out.
Corner. It's called Corner Beat. Yeah, actually, she just left. Yesterday was her last day. So, but yes, Corner Beat. And but yeah, there's like several people there that are trans, and also a lot of the people that go there are also trans. So like, for me, to me it's like the most interesting ever because the thing that drew me to yoga is hatha, the idea of merging sun and moon and those energies and walking the middle path. And like I found that within my own self. Like when I find what I internalize or I identify as masculine and feminine qualities and I try to merge them rather than preference one over the other and say like because to me it's like I need to know how to do martial arts which I would consider a societally masculine thing, but I also need to know how to cook. I need to know how to like play well with my kids, but I also need to be able to hold. Like to me, that's my life journey. If I could just like put little goals to it, it's like, am I I already know how to be aggressive. I already know how to be hyper masculine. Like that's no longer interesting. Now I'd like to see how I can build a character that's more well-rounded. And I think like a lot of us are like looking for well-roundedness, especially like in the career path and this. But I think if you look from these higher order things, like well-roundedness can be seen then like a balance between strength and flexibility, right? Between like will and surrender. Like this is like this is a better way to approach things because a lot of our life lessons are because we like lean too heavily. Oh, I want out. It's me, mine, mine, mine. And now we're imbalanced in that energy. So we started off talking about like signs. The signs are broken up between masculine, feminine, and immutable. So like Leo is a masculine sign, Cancer is a feminine sign, for example. Aries is a masculine sign, Gemini is genderless. So for that same reason. So even these societal ideas of quote unquote masculine and feminine, they're not even really meant to be like they're not meant to be boxes to pin people down. It's just like human beings have to categorize things and the mind works in dualities, but you can have these different dualities and then see there's a positive or a balanced way to express that and then an imbalanced way to express that. So that's how I look at it because then you can assess. A lot of us are like, how do I know if I'm doing the right thing? And it's like, how do I know if I'm acting in balance? Well, it's like, okay, if you learn about a little bit about the qualities of Leo, you can look for them within yourself and you can say, this is the balanced quality of Leo and this is the imbalanced quality of Leo. This is the balanced quality of Cancer because they're two sides of the coin. It's like your vices, quote unquote vices, and we're using good and bad, but this is all just tools that the mind can use to help discern because ultimately like we still have to bear the consequences of our action. If you act in a way that's harmful, you have to bear that consequence. So if you can learn tools that in wisdom that like helps you act in a way that won't generate that negative karma, I feel like that's what we're here to do. So like the balanced, like there is a balanced way to be in Cancer. There is a balanced way to have a territory, and it's like there is a balanced way to play and to express like that need to grow and almost like be show off and almost like flex. It's like there are balanced ways to express ourselves, and I think like it kind of has to start there because a lot of the times like we second guess our personality traits in the first place. We second guess like all of these different things. Like, okay, I'm an Aries, like, and I know other people don't seem to be like other people don't seem to act the way that I act, but I feel like this is the way to act in this particular moment. Rada, like, you have that strength in you to be like, like, do not treat that kid like that. And you also have a role model in which you have someone who's like, do not treat these kids like that. And what happened? People sat there and was like, okay, we won't treat those kids like that. And, like, and because some things need a little bit of a brute force instrument to be addressed. Um, okay, let's go to trans a little bit. What I love about like the trans thing and a couple of the misconceptions about trans is the idea is that like all the people like a lot of the idea about trans and even with the kids is that it is like people are watching haters, I'll say. People are like, oh, they're just watching TikTok or they're on social media or this is there's euphoria and all these different things that come out and now all of a sudden like kids are just watching this and they're turning into this. And it's interesting.
Like
Andrew
how they say, it's
Huberman.
like all of a sudden, like it's not been happening for,
It's like all my, it's
forever.
funny. Do you know Sierra? She was a singer. Sierra's like a singer,
Uh-huh.
early, 2000s kind of singer time frame. And my whole, when I was a kid, like the big conspiracy theory was that she was both male and female. And like just that, or like amongst the 7-year-olds or the 8-year-olds are like, did you see the picture? Like she's got both, man. Like we even knew what it looked like. But like there's always been stuff like that or like even when my mom's from Queens, so like I know drag is a little bit of a different category, but like she was always open to that kind of stuff and like just because of how my parents were, it's never really been that much of a threat to me. But what I will say is they're threatening is the territorial aspect of things where it's like it's I think that sometimes, and this is what I wanted to emphasize, it doesn't make sense. It's just because you're close. I think that sometimes we try to intellectualize it or hope that others can intellectualize it and overcome that instinct. But it's like that guy, I know guys, that's a guy, he's in the bathroom with a girl. That's period. With my daughter, I don't care about any of the other details. And I think that yes, there are men that like might be threatened that like one day they might hook up, but like married men with daughters that aren't trying to hook up with anybody, their main thought process is little boys are pervs. Like I have so many pervy memories, and I don't even consider myself that much of a perv. Like as a kid, it's just like when you're 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, like even like a lot of guys, like there's a lot of stories of like 13-year-old boys doing circle jerks or doing things that are gay, but they don't do them into adulthood, like women too. But it's like that there's that adolescence time where there's a lot of confusion. So they're just like, hey, I know dudes are pervs. If that guy knows what it feels like to ejaculate, that is going to be probably one of his top two factors in his life.
So
And not because we don't like him, but because that's just what men have been taught.
can
Yeah.
we go back to this idea of pervs? Like,
Yeah.
what makes somebody a perv or what behavior or mindset? Because puritanical background dictates what we think is acceptable sexually and what's not acceptable sexually. And
That's
we like
hateful.
this word perv to be like this way to keep any deviant sexual thoughts or behavior. Um,
Mm.
because
Okay.
what you just explained was very natural. I mean, it is a part of natural young men and women. I'm sorry, teenage girls are not immune from quote unquote pervy behavior or thought.
100%. 100%.
Um, so I'm just kind of curious about that
So
particular word and what that brought up.
I love it. Yeah, because remember, we grew up in the like porn on your phone time. So like it was a little bit more intense where
That
it's
is
like
intense.
okay, first of all, like if you just go on Pornhub and type in the word perv, like there's probably an association between certain activity. Like essentially doing things non-consensually, like to get off on women. So it's like it's illegal. That's what makes it, or like it's illegal, or it feels morally wrong even when you're doing it because you're like, this is kind of like it's kind of like when you're
Does
like,
it feel morally wrong because, and is it illegal for viable reasons? Or is it
yeah.
illegal and feels wrong because societal norms have told you? That's why
So
I'm
like,
questioning
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
I want to
It's
understand
tricky.
like what kind
So
of behaviors
okay.
were because a lot of people say gay people are pervy. There's nothing pervy
Um,
about gay
no,
sex.
like
I
pervy
mean, there can
means
be. I'm not saying, I mean, if you want to use perv in a nice, positive,
yeah.
empowering term and you want to say I have pervy sex, that's fine. I'm not trying to judge you on that.
I mean, all right, okay. I'm also using it in the context of like I'm a 90s kid, so I'm using it in the context of like when we were 12, 13, 14. So like this is the thought process. It's like in order for women to feel comfortable around you and on your path to discover what that is, you go through a certain era of trial and error. You go, okay, what's an acceptable way to talk to a girl? What's an acceptable way to approach a girl? What's an acceptable way to touch a girl? Like, can you just go up to a girl and grab her ass? Like a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old, because you saw like someone do it or you see it on porn and they get turned on? Like, if a dude came up to you right now and grabbed your ass, he would be technically considered a pervert. Like, because, like, not because we don't like him, but because he aggressed the physical boundary.
Well, yeah,
And
that's a big.
that's what dads are for. That's what dads are for because dads know that, like, when they were 10 to 8, probably to 25, 45, some of them are still fucking up, and especially the older dudes. I mean, Trump, like, they don't like that way to approach women where it's like, unless unless you got a bunch of money or something like that, like you just can't be, you can't even think that that's even within the realm of possibility for you. So I think that when you,
That's fair.
as I was just gonna say like as a boy, like for me, just trying to self-correct along my own path, where it's like, how do I want my sexual energy to be expressed? How do I want to concentrate like how I think about women. Like, do I want to be thinking thoughts like, because it's like we all have our different vices. So it's like we all have our own sexual vices in our own mindset. So like Theo Vaughn, I use Theo Vaughn as a good example. Theo Vaughn jokes all the time about being a peeping tom. He jokes all the time. He's like, bro, he's like, there wasn't a girl in my neighborhood. He makes a joke like, it's
Right.
like, he's like, there won't be a girl in my neighborhood that gets a new bra without me knowing. Like, so what that means is I've got binoculars looking in people's windows. I mean, so that's what I mean. I mean like stuff like that where it's like you are breaching boundaries in order to satisfy your lust, but you also feel consciously and karma comes around and like you get kicked in the nuts like, or something happens, and you're
How much
like,
of
"Oh my
that
goodness,
How
I
much of
wasn't supposed
that
to
is
do
just
this."
an expression, though, of like suppressed
It's
behavior,
natural.
right?
It's
Like,
natural.
I wonder
It's
how much
natural.
training did you get, or how much did your parents sit down with you and talk about sex and have these like open conversations of like, these feelings are going to come up and you may experience this, or you may get confused about this, or this behavior in our society, particularly, is going to be viewed in a certain way. Or, I mean, I think we're not having these conversations at all generally are learning about sex from their friends, but now you guys are learning about it from the internet. And you're learning about it from, like you said, like Pornhub. And so Pornhub is, again, I
Well,
think it's a expectation. Like, I'm just gonna say I'm not one of those women who are totally down on porn. I've watched plenty of porn in my life and I've enjoyed a fair amount of
yeah.
it. So, but I do think it's like certain behaviors, it's acting out certain behaviors or fantasies that we have, and then we're watching them. I wonder how much of it is just like dysregulation in our own sexual
Can I?
upbringing instead of like pervy behavior. Like how much
I'm gonna yeah, I'm
trauma
gonna do that more.
we raised.
I'll address that more directly because I think we could pose like a study. So like, I know some friends that are nudists and nudists like they have, resorts and stuff and they have kids there, right? That are also nude. So they grow up seeing naked baddies all their life. And it's like, to me, it's like, I think that's a much more preferable system because I don't, it's like you're just used to this, like I know, like not exactly, but I'm just saying like that energy of like, this is not meant to be like a sex tool. Like the only time you see, because what happens, like you're rewiring your
Bodies are
brain.
just bodies. They're just
Your
bodies.
bodies are just, they're just bodies. These are just really vehicles for the soul. And it's like the most beautiful girls are like their bodies might not even be the most quote unquote beautiful. It's like they're what shines from them. And so for me, it was more so like this was my idea of like American public system sexual culture. And like this is Virginia, which is like was a conservative state um most of my life. So
I say, just so you know, Virginia in general was very conservative. It was only when Virginia Beach and Northern Virginia started growing up that we started turning into a blue state. So it's true. For most of our
yeah,
lives, we lived in a very conservative state.
100%. And like Stafford County specifically it was conservative. And so there was kind of dual purposes of sex because first of all, the elephant in the room is by the time you're 5, 6, you understand there's sexual pleasure. Like you understand that there's a spot that feels different than other spots in your body. So I think it really has to start there. So your sexual curiosity and your sexual expression typically starts to manifest kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade in your relationships with others.
This happens a lot with little girls too, by the way. Like little girls will be told,
100%.
stop touching yourself.
100%. Oh
Like
yeah.
thing that like very early on, you have to teach little girls to stop touching themselves.
Exactly. So like that is like probably that's the first like drop in the bucket of like perv, right? Right. Like, that like and like for me as a yogi now, like and like being more introduced to like different practices is like I believe that you should have a pleasure practice that like well, while you have a vehicle here, like that doesn't mean that you're not meant to experience sexual pleasure. It's just not meant to be selfish and at the harm of others. And to have a better sexual life is like I think you can do that. I think that that's something that you can, and I think interestingly moderation and practicing celibacy or like not always overindulging and pressing that button helps to have a better sexual life. So I just want to put that in there. Now the way that we were kind of taught about it was like, okay, now you have these urges, and it's like it was all about like the mechanics of sex and the laws around sex. Like this is what you can do, this is what you can't do. We're the teachers. This was like fifth grade for most of us, unless and some parents could not have their kids go to these classes. And after that, it was like fifth grade. By fifth grade and sixth grade, it's like 1 and 2 of like sperm, eggs, tubes, menstrual cycle. There's such a thing called a menstrual cycle, and that's kind of it. But like, if you're a person like me, it's like, look, I'm a martial artist. It's like I'm trying to get from white belt to black belt. So I'm like, I'm trying to learn how to make love from a white belt to a black belt. You know what I'm trying to say? And like, when you're, so that's the thing. They put love making on your mind. So now you're 11, thinking about like, okay, well, if it, and all the songs are like, you gotta, and being black, it's like you gotta be able to throw it down. Like, you can't just. So
Culture is not helping.
there's a huge element of basically like you need to be good at doing this. So that pulls you to porn because it's like, well, this is the main place where people are like allegedly really good at making love.
Or I can learn
And
how to even do it because I have no idea. Nobody ever taught me anything about how to do it, right?
exactly, exactly. And I think that sometimes that like that, and we're talking about like what's that force that causes that like suppression, and I think it's that protection instinct because we know that like how strong it is within our own selves to like draw us away from our families. Like the first girl I had, the first real girlfriend I had, like how did we meet? Well, she was sneaking out of her house to go see me, and like her dad was a cop. He pulled up to my house the next day with his gun on his hip and was like, "My daughter's too young to be seeing boys. I do not want to hear your name or see your face for at least another 6 months." So
Well,
like,
that, wow, right in and of
so
that
so that guy,
probably started all issue, flurry of issues right there.
yeah.
Like
Well, it worked out in the
having
end.
your
It
first
worked out.
experience and then all of a sudden being threatened by a cop about it. That's deep.
100%. Yeah, she got caught. I was like, "Why'd you run?" And it was so funny. It's everything's funny now in retrospect, but at the time it was like, I can see that, and I can see like, I can see it. So, you have this little, he had four little girls too, particularly, and he was a military man. So like most of the, and a lot of the guys that I was around growing up, they were all military men primarily, or government workers. So they were just protectionist by trade. And then
Yeah.
so everything else like trickled down. And well, I didn't really get a chance to really dive into the trans thing because I think this is like a good segue into like really like honoring and respecting this space because when I think about like scripture and like these different folks, like you're kind of trying to transcend these like societal dualities and pressures that are placed on you and like operate from a more authentic space. Like in the yogic system, there's the unmanifested as the masculine, the feminine, the manifested, but then like you can kind of break that down too, where it's like there's thought and then there's like action, or you could like you can just break them this elements of two sides of the coin and down into everything that's like created. And what I think is like so beautiful about our people is like we've been so imbalanced that I think the creator was just like enough's enough. I'm going to manifest a generation that like will not comply by this. Like, and I think like we could say there's environmental factors, there's societal factors, like, all these different things that could be contributing to it. But either way, at the end of the day, this is the thing that's happening. I've met a lot of people that had transitioned that didn't even know other people were transitioning. Like a lot of people in Denver here, they're from South Carolina, they're from some rural spot where they're like, where them and their partner are like the only two people that are really feeling this shift, this wave.
Oh, it's so lonely and heartbreaking, right?
It's just like, well, and you know what's kind of interesting because I think some people it was lonely, but to some people it was just like I've already been independent. I've already been like me, and I've always been, you know, able to like, not I'm not saying me, I'm saying from their point of view, they'd be like, hey, I've always kind of been like a little bit outside the pack anyways, but just the feeling of like, okay, maybe I'm too spirited rather than identifying with just having a female spirit or a masculine spirit, I'm two spirited. Or to me, it's like we're homogenous, really. Our spirits are in my mind frame, we have like a homogenous spirit. Um, but now they're going like in Colorado. What's another thing that's interesting is that like, because I'm friends with these people, now I'm in that culture. So there was an artist at the Denver Art Museum, and he was emphasizing how like in native cultures, they always knew that people were born along this spectrum. Like physically, of course, because of just how they dressed, you knew that there was, mismatched the features, if you will, and they were still accepted. So a lot of the people that are over here that feel connected to like more native roots, they feel like this is more part of the colonial system, a part of like the Judeo-Christian system that like put people between, made God masculine,
Yeah,
got rid of the mother.
yeah.
Um, and then its tactics on how to handle the planet was very tilted. So to me, it's like this is like another sign of the spiritual revolution, or like just what Bob Marley always said is like the problem is they can't stop time. God keeps creating more and more people, conquerors, generation after generation after generation, to come and conquer and take the throne back. Basically, like, nice try, you almost got us. Here we are again. And for me personally, I'm in that mixture place because like, you know, my dad my dad personally, like he didn't take a masculine role. Like he was the one that was home. My mom was generally working for most of my childhood and like early in teenage life. And he certainly was comfortable with being more effeminate. Like he wasn't like necessarily, he was still older, but like the point of view, what I'm getting from that was that like it doesn't matter how you express, it matters how you are. And like and to emphasize that above everything else. And I think that like a lot of folks that like when you start to judge trans folks, like you don't even actually know these people that you're judging, and like or even getting to like know, but like as I've gotten to know them, all the conversations that me and you've had, Rada, they can hang with it. That a lot of these people are very like involved in spiritual
Yeah.
life, and they're very like interested in
Well,
like they're
otherwise
very
they're
high
othering
minded.
them, right?
Yeah,
Why other than like there's something other than us? Like you think just because they're
100%,
trans, they're different, they're not human beings with the same humanness?
100%. It doesn't make sense.
No.
And that's what they tried to do to us for 500 years. So it's like, I know the trick.
Yeah, exactly. It's happening to it happens to anybody who they feel like is different, and different becomes threatening.
Mm,
The protectionism is interesting because you were talking about like the protectionism. We've been talking about protectionism as a feminine energy a lot, but then there's also this masculine protectionism,
mm,
like the military, and wondering if that is ultimately also a feminine expression of that fierceness. Maybe, I don't know, I'm
mm.
just thinking about this for the first time, that maybe that military, I always think of it as very masculine, but I wonder if actually it's like unbalanced feminine protectionism that just takes on this certain like role. Because that fierce protecting your territory in nature, in a lot of ways, it is like a feminine energy. Lions may be a little bit different because lions, we know that male lions are very protective of their sphere, but it's really the female lions that also are such fierce protectors of their young. What do you think? What do you think about that? Am I?
I think you know, 'cause I mean, I love this topic because this is my favorite topic in the world. Because it's like I think I'll put it out this way. I think the benefit of thinking this way is because it seems like there's no roadmap, but there is an up and a down. It's like there is a positive or a productive masculine energy that, you know, yeah, that you can use a role model as an example and be like, okay, and to me this is the difference. The way that it's balanced masculine is that the men have to be in the sphere in which they're protecting. So you can't be like this is my territory. Now I need to be 100,000 miles over there, fighting over there. That is not that's where it gets imbalanced. And I think that's where it becomes more feminine because this is the big thing that gets guys in trouble. But I think I'm just gonna say it because we're all friends here. And it's like, I'll put it this way, like the women in my life have said, I just have different needs than you. I have more needs than you. Like you, Quentin, you could probably just lay on the floor and be content and cool, like da 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 da. But like in order for the women in my life to be more comfortable, it's just different. It's like there does seem to be like that's kind of like the weight behind the quote unquote providing aspect of the masculinity is like you're providing the needs because you can provide for yourself a little bit easier. There's a little bit less needs that like the stereotypical man might have. Like just the men in my life, and that's I just can only use them example. Like they might have a thing they like this guy likes cars, this guy likes clothes, whatever. But they try to be simple, generally speaking, and try not to have too many things. So I think that like even when I think about like this is honestly what makes me think about Europe and Europe's like history from like the 1300s to World War II it was like, yeah, the kings wanted things, sure. I'm sure they wanted some things, but I feel like the queens and the lavishness and the pageantry and like the cloths and like a lot of that is feminine energy in a way. Like a lot of that, so a lot of these products that we're like, you know, raping the earth for or like assaulting the planet for like or in the need to like for guys to just be like, hey honey, look what I got you. Oh, I'm a Viking, I went over and sieged northern France and look what I got you. I got you this gold cup. Like
Well, so
that's
that
what
she had
that's
enough for her young, right?
she has
That's
enough
where
for her young.
comes from, is protecting your children and making sure that your
Yeah,
children are protected, because traditionally it was the woman's job to protect the children. The men could just
100%.
leave and go off and do whatever, whereas a woman had to make sure that her children were safe, fed. I mean, in a lot of cultures, that's the way it's been, is that it was the woman's
100%.
responsibility to make sure that the children were safe and fed, and the man was off doing whatever the man was doing. And so I do
Man,
think
to me
you're right. There's a lot of that energy of like, oh my
yeah,
God, I've got to feed these other kids. I've got all these other beings that are reliant on me to make sure that their needs are met. Whereas I don't think traditionally in a lot of cultures that was the male experience. Like the man was supposed to take care of the family overall as an umbrella, but he could also just leave and go find another family.
mm,
The woman was like, these children came out of my physical form, I feel like a physical attachment to them, and therefore I want to make sure that they are taken care of. So I think you're probably not wrong that women do require a lot. Men are
Yeah.
very much like, I mean, it's even like a trope of like a
Mm-hmm.
man being very attached to the woman and the woman being very attached to her children.
100%. And I think, in like in Western civilization history, one and two, what they taught us was that like a lot of like women in Europe and especially like the nobility, they were like that was how they got status, was how well their children did in society and their ability to manage the house. So to me, this was my mindset of how it got set up. It was like the woman would be like, we need X amount of dollars, figure it out. With those X amount of dollars, I'll figure it out from there, and or we need this amount of berries, whatever it is. Like that's kind of the type of energy and the dichotomy, and that might explain why the vehicles are a little bit different. And so, but to me, it's like it kind of got hijacked and corrupted because what do we do now? It's like, for example, like in Russia, right? Exxon has a oil rig in Crimea, or Britain had some standover in this place. So now the military needs to come there because the people that actually live there rebel against them trying to satisfy the women in their homeland, or themselves and the women in their homeland. Like you don't need. That's what you're seeing in Africa now. Is that like a lot? Like these, I forget his name, but this one African leader, he was like, France is using their uranium from here, like to do what they need to do. Like all these countries, there's still several of these countries. They're still colonial forces, and they're using the raw materials from our nations to build their stuff. We're just gonna
Particularly
stop doing
Africa,
that.
for Africa.
I
I mean,
Yeah, they're
Africa
poor
is
because the
really,
stuff that
people
they
are just ignoring Africa. Like most of the
yeah.
world, like whatever Africa, we're not even
But
listening
I think that's changing.
yet.
I think that's changing now because you
I
know
think so.
why? Music. First, it's always music.
Hmm.
Like the Jamaicans hit it up with Bob Marley because he kind of showed that area, but then like now there's a lot more Afro beats music that's in popular culture in America. And like there's a lot of people here from Nigeria and Ghana and these places that like they go back home and they're showing videos of them and they're in a nightclub that looks like just as nice as you are, back in your own hometown. So,
Anything
but
more
like,
like internet, when people have access to the internet and they can share, that's the beauty and the power of social media, is that when we see
mm,
it, we it normalizes for us and it personalizes for us. And that's the power of like all of this social media where we're seeing things really up close. Like I'm seeing people care more about what's happening in the Middle East than
mm,
traditionally they had before
mm, mm,
because they can see it. And it's not just on the news at night. It's like all these images, all this information. I think the same thing's happening with Africa. Like we're just seeing more imagery. Like we're not relying on the
mm.
media to tell us what's going on in Africa because the media does not give a shit what's going on in Africa. Like you
Yep.
could watch news for 365 nights and you're lucky if you get two reports of what's happening in Africa. Um, but so I think that that's a really
100%.
powerful thing for us to be able to like see what's happening. So
100%.
that was
It's so true. I mean, it's like that with Iran. It's like that with Afghanistan. Like there's this American dude he's going on a bike ride from like Portugal to Japan. And right now, like July 24th, 25th, he was going through Afghanistan, Iran, and he's showing like all these people. He went through where the Taliban got started, and it's just showing you like when you just see people, as soon as you see these images, it just changes everything. It's like, oh, this is not what you guys are talking about. This is not that, these people are not like what you're claiming them out to be. And I think the whole that like the trans things like that too. So that's what I was getting at was I was like, hey, like this when people experience a different group of people, the natural assumption, because historically that assumption has been that group of people is trying to take something away from us. They might not be saying it clearly now. They might be using trickery and connery, but like at the end of the day, that is a part of a political team and politicians want power. So there's also that element too of like any social issue, there's always that element too where it's like, huh, okay, well that's nice. Yeah, I know your whole thing about global warming, that's nice, but is that just like some trick to gain more power? Oh yeah, I hear what you're saying about this, like, or is that really just a trick? And I think both things can be true because like I'll take Black Lives Matter and Pride, for example. Like a lot of folks in both communities, like, Yeah, we like the sentiment, but like, Macy's and all these mega companies like doing stuff that they didn't do before, and especially when you work for these companies, you know that they have the loans that they're getting by BlackRock are only getting approved if they adopt these certain policies, and you're like, well, and also like they're not really rebel. They're still very corporate, like the groups inside the companies. So I think for me and like in our generation that have like seen it rise and then like kind of live with it for a while, but like, okay, there's a level of inauthenticity here because the HR directors are still white ladies,
You can
with all
also
due
tell
respect.
like how many of them drop their DEI policies.
Literally, they're like, what?
I was like, I
Like when
have to. They're like, what? I don't have to do this
they're
anymore?
like, oh, I'm
Great.
done.
Yeah.
And that was
And
and
then
that
there's
was
a lot
and
of companies that just kept them, even if quietly, because they actually believed in them.
that and it was like we knew that all along, brother. You didn't have to tell me. I'm like, oh, you think these guys that started working in the 70s, like, you think they come on now. The bank said something. Like, and it's crazy because we have to now we're here. I actually met the person who ran our program, and I don't I think she was African. She was like raised she actually invited us all to go to like an African safari, but she was like in the banking world kind of thing, and she was like talking about like, yeah, this is our packet, this is what we have to do to comply in order to get like this funding. And I was like, she's like, my job is kind of like to translate that like into these initiatives. And like in construction it's super terrible. It's just so embarrassingly terrible because why is construction pretending like, and it's extra, yeah, because it's extra. We're all kind of rigid people. Like we're very hard-nosed, direct, non-philosophical like people. So it's like, and then it's like the other half of the people don't speak English. They're not even a part of. They're not even like in this cultural thing that you got going on. So you're sitting here in a translator, like, so it was just so out of place, especially in that industry. And I'm not saying that it was like that it was okay that there's prejudice in the industry, but like you're not gonna do it this way. This actually just makes them all laugh at us and like just look at you like look at these white collar folks like, you know, just going through this dance for the man. And so anyways, that was I had we had since we were there, I had to talk about that for a second. But yeah, what I learned the most about like all the groups of people and even like anybody is like, yeah, just talk to a person and see how they're actually like. Like a lot of trans folk, they don't even make it like the central thing about them.
It
It's
shouldn't
just a
be the
part of
something
what's going
about
on.
them.
Exactly, but it's like
They're
politicians.
humans and they're people who are complex and interesting. That's not,
Exactly.
I mean, I'm not trying to diminish them either, because obviously many of them have come a long way and fought very hard to have the rights they have. But in general, what gender they choose to be is literally the least interesting thing, but it becomes the main thing about them. And that's sad
100%.
because they're artists, they're musicians, they're bankers, they're,
Mm.
executives, they're parents, they're human rights activists, they're all these things that are amazing. And yet all we seem to focus on is
Yeah.
what physical parts they have
Yeah. Who you sleep with, what physical
or
parts you
what
have.
hormones you have.
So, okay, so the military, what I like to put a pin in that point of how it's like how I see it as a more imbalanced feminine is because we're using it for greed. We're using it for ways to get resources for others. So war isn't like some it's like it's a way to make money. It's a way to provide for the family. And it was never meant to be that. It should never be that. That's not the design intent behind militia. I mean, it could have been that in like in other places, but like specifically in America, specifically here, that's not what it's supposed to be. I don't care.
What
And
it's supposed to be, do you think? Because wasn't it just
um,
founded on militia of like people
it,
and having the right to protect their own property?
militia were always organized. So the idea of I was actually looking this up because I love history. So this is Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton had these dual visions,
Yeah.
and I'm a Thomas Jefferson guy. I'm sorry.
Are
I'm not
you?
partisan. Yeah, yeah, because because Alexander Hamilton advocated for a central bank, and I've
There's
realized
so
that the
many good
cent
Hamilton people now.
well, especially New Yorkers. Yeah, they got y'all. Yeah, I'm a Virginian. Yeah, no, I grew up next. Yeah, no, I'm a Virginian. You're not tricking me. And I'll even look it up. But it's like all the stuff that your parents fought so hard for you to live for is exact. Thomas Jefferson is exactly what Thomas Jefferson said. He said, small communities, like neutral communities, like that are more self-determinate. The idea behind a militia was that really each town or each town would have its own form of a militia. To me, that's the most constructive use of that masculine energy in society that exists regardless. Like what we're talking about, like the military men and that, like there's just dudes like that. Like they're just born out the womb and they're like, I'm here to protect y'all physically, period. That's what I'm gonna do for working age. And the behind a militia is that like there's always gonna be men incarnated in a particular area that like you grow up in these hills, you grew up in these valleys, you played in these, you played in this farmland. You know how to protect that particular plot of land better than anybody else. To me, that's the design. So what ended up happening with the militia is the militia turned into the exterior military and the police. And rather than the militia being a force that protects those people from exterior forces, police tries to like, protect it internally, which I have a hard time with sometimes. I would prefer a system where like if women like in our world, it's like the idea is that like women need to be protected by police because men are crazy. That's kind of like the narrative that the police use to like get more money. Is they're like, look at all
I
these
know
crazy guys
nothing
over here.
about the history of the police. Have you
You
read
should
up
look
on
it
the
up.
history of the
Of
police?
course, yeah,
Tell us
of
a little
course.
thing about the history of the police because I'd be really interested. It's not something
So
I
a
ever
lot of those,
bothered to look up.
a lot of the OGs, how do they settle their problems? They dueled. Most of our presidents, most of the elites, most of them dueled. So men used to literally handle shit hand in hand. You know about the Midwesterns and all that kind of stuff. So after the Western expansion and we continued to conquer the Native Americans, now you need a system in place that manages the Native Americans. And now that slaves are free, you need a system that manages that. So you literally see a lot of these police states starting in the 1840s to the 1880s, 1890s. And to me, like not to me, but I will say there's clear evidence still of like that militant industrial complex, the gun folk and the security apparatus needing to make money throughout this because there was peace after World War II. The Native Americans, you could say like the Battle of Bighorn was like in the 1880s, like the late 1880s, and that was when like the Reservation Act kind of hit and they all had to hit the reservations. So for like 30 years there wasn't really like a war from 1880 until to World War One, and in that time period, that's when you see like the expansion of the police, the expansion of Jim Crow, the expansion of like, obviously like the Native Americans weren't taking it like on the chin. Like there's definitely some difficulty there. And then obviously the mass migration that was coming, and that's where like New York, like it's so crazy you went to New York after Yogaville. Like New York to me is like one of the most militant places on the planet. Like the way that the government treats its people, it's so like to me it's so tight-fisted.
It's also weird because
Um,
it's also one of the most like staunchly democratic
well, to
cities
me
we
that makes
have.
sense. Well, to me that makes sense because the Democratic Party was the party of state control, or is, or always has been. Um,
Except for the Democratic Party switched so drastically over the years. You know, the Democratic Party, definitely, yeah, there was
it,
not like
it,
the most
yeah.
more liberal party.
So another a little bit about history too. And this is what I say too, like about the parties is that like the parties are also a facade. Like the real parties, I will say, is what we just said, like Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, because one can't exist without the other. So after Abraham Lincoln won the war, most of the parties, most of the people that were in the Whig Party. So Alexander Hamilton essentially they thought of the American system, which I consider a downstream of the Babylon system, which is what like Bob Marley and them often talk about, which is where you try to orient a nation to produce certain goods. And when you orient a nation to produce certain goods, just by that very nation, you're subjugating people. You have to.
Well,
So they were like,
there's also federal versus state, right? Like,
yeah. So he was like, in order for us to have a strong country. So Thomas Jefferson's idea was like, in order for us to be strong, essentially corny, but we had to be free, as in people have to be able to live self-determinately and experiment. his idea was in order for the nation to be strong and, raise a powerful army is we have to have tobacco, we have to have a central bank, we have to have certain raw exports, we have to have certain things that like is our niche. But like from my point of view, already it's like who are you to determine that? But that was their idea. So after the revolution, after the Civil War, and now the northern states, which benefited obviously from this because that was how their society was oriented, was that they were a banking society. So like even today, Manhattan, even today, I mean that's a part of the 9/11 story. So is that the banking the capitalist system somehow some way gets paired with war making, and that is like a corrupting force. So anyways, so that division there between them to me is still like the mainstream debate where it's like should our society have an overall plan at all that is spearheaded by a government that has the capacity to even plan ahead in the future for all of its people, or should the government's main priority be like I don't know what these kids are going to be when they grow up. I don't know how they're going to turn out to be, but like let's just like do what we can do to protect them from exterior forces and let them kind of flourish and thrive. And those two forces, I feel like, you know, those two forces expressed today is the police, the tight-handed, the smacking, the beating the kids kind of energy, and like which is unbalanced, and then like because it's fear-based and stuff. And then the exterior force is like we got to smack everybody else around because if we don't smack other people around, then they're going to smack us around, which is also imbalanced. So so I think that's where we find ourselves today.
Um, okay, so we're gonna tangent over here again. You keep
Yeah.
talking about how much you love Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah.
Um, there are many who say that Thomas Jefferson could have easily ended slavery at the time of the Civil War, and he chose not to because, first of all, he had children that he had fathered who were slaves,
Mm.
and that his relationship, particularly with, Sally Hemings, is that her name? Uh, was very problematic, and that he did not want them to be released and to be free, and therefore he made choices about how we would move forward. Because originally, I believe that particularly John Adams wanted the slaves to be free. He did not want black people to be continue to be slaves. And Thomas Jefferson fought very hard, and many people credit him as being the main reason why we ended up with
Yeah.
the
I
system
mean,
that we had. And
I don't.
after the revolution, he could have said, let's actually include black people. So I'm just curious about like what you think about that dichotomy, because you are one of the few people who
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
met who is such like who is not just a kind of privileged white male, who is such a huge fan of Thomas Jefferson. So I'm really curious because in my circles, it is not actually as popular to be such a fan of Thomas Jefferson if you are consider yourself to be a little bit woke. So I'm so curious about like how you wrap your head around that. And I think my internet just froze a little bit. So I think that Quentin's probably trying to speak, but I'm not sure he's actually hearing me continuing to talk. So I'm going to pause just for a second until our internet comes back.
Awesome. I think this is the best question on the planet. Because I think like a lot of there's really two answers that are almost equally important. I think sometimes when you're not like a part of like the black community, for example, or I get this scene a lot where it's like it seems like slavery and the legacy of slavery is like the most important thing to us, but to me it's like most presidents had slaves as long as the slavery was around. I mean, even let's see, let's go all the way up because he wasn't the first president either, obviously, but he wasn't the first president. Um, there was already a political party against him, which was Alexander Hamilton, and but that's like kind of like little bit of details. But it was like there literally was a civil war. Like there nobody was intending to get rid of slavery. Like yeah, okay, he had slaves, but it's kind of like he had an iPhone. Like And like that's how I feel. It's like we know that the cobalt and the raw material. We just talked about it earlier. That's slave labor. Those people aren't really getting paid. You know what I mean? That's So
Some
that's
of
like
some of the
what's
clothing we may wear,
yeah,
like
famously,
slaves.
famously. I mean, even
We
we're
know
talking
that.
about
It's not even a question. We like know it, and
yeah,
people still just are like decide not to pay any
yeah,
attention or care.
yeah. So I guess to me, it's like okay. So then it's like all right. So out of the slave masters, let's rate him amongst the slave masters. We can start there. And I think that since at that time in our history, we don't really have a choice but to do that. Like me in particular, you know, you have to take everything with a grain of salt when it comes to any political figure. But I was like, I really wanted to get to the bottom of Thomas Jefferson's position on slavery specifically, and also knowing my positions on things right now that probably aren't in the right spot, historically, just with a little bit of grace.
Hmm.
And it's just been like, okay, so what were his positions? Okay, so his position was the world empire is Great Britain. Great Britain, with your permission or without your permission, will be bringing slaves here, right? All his life, right, until the formation of the state. Now there's a state, but they were still like, okay, Great Britain. His position that they said was written in his lawyer cases because he allegedly he represented blacks in law for like, as according to the law, if black people have rights here, then he felt like it was his right to defend that. Kind of getting into like his slave history, it was like he was 14 when his dad died, and he became the man of the household. And there was the way that most like chattel slavery was then is sort of like how it is now, where it was like you might not necessarily have a bunch of random slaves, but you have families of slaves. So we had so like on the record, there's like three families of slaves that had hundreds of them in the families. So it was very much the way that it was like it was a little bit nuanced in that time because it was like it's not like a bunch of random people. It's like this is a whole family that is trying to stay together. Now the slave trade was different. When you traded slaves, you'd rip families apart. But like if you're a really rich person, like and you have hundreds and hundreds of slaves, like do you really need to trade that many slaves on a frequent basis? You're more so in the field of managing. And then when he turned 21, he got married, and a part of his marriage was overtaking the woman's half, and they also had hundreds of slaves. So Thomas Jefferson inherited slaves, and then I also looked in to see like if he got any more slaves, and like it was unclear. But the idea was that he wasn't in the business of selling slaves; it was primarily managing the slaves that he had. Cool. Having sex with the slaves he had. I mean, black girls are sexy. So, I mean, we're not even gonna do that. I mean, that's everybody wants to look like us. So, him wanting to hit black girls is not actually, I know it's different. I understand, but I'm making a joke, but I'm being serious too. We have beautiful women. Y'all, they literally said, we're not strong enough to do this by ourselves. We need to get the strong ones from down there to do all the work. I
Yeah.
mean, and so like to me, like as a black person, that's what I'm saying. Like I have great pride in that story. Like y'all couldn't build us without us. Like you literally had to take us and like instill we're here. And so what I was getting with the history of the police and how this ties into slavery is because his thought process was end the transatlantic slave trade. Sort of like it's almost like before you can like handle the criminal justice system, you have to handle like policing at the surface. And from my point of view, his stance on that was more favorable. His stance on chattel slavery, it was more so like you got to do one thing after the other. And right now, Great Britain and us, so we had to figure out a way. So during his presidency, he did put in measures to stop the transatlantic slave trade. Now, it didn't work. It didn't stay full time until Britain voluntarily stopped themselves. But Britain is over here talking like they're the ones. Britain. That's the thing. So that's the main difference between Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson. So I looked it up. I like while I was like getting my computer screen up, I was like, what's the difference between Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson? This is AI overview just from the regular Google, okay?
Read it.
Okay, cool. Alexander Hamilton, I'll start with them. Strong federal government. Hamilton believed a powerful federal government was essential for national stability and economic growth. He advocated for a broad interpretation of the Constitution, allowing the government to take necessary actions not explicitly forbidden. 2. National bank. He championed the establishment of a national bank, arguing it would stabilize the nation's finances, create credit, and facilitate economic development. Economic vision. Hamilton envisioned an economy based on trade, manufacturing, and financial institutions, believing this would make the U.S. a global economic power. 4. Foreign policy. He favored close ties with Great Britain, seeing it as a key trading partner and a model of economic success. That alone, I'm gonna stop right there. So, like, we just fought a war against these guys, and your next thought is
Ago.
we should be just like them. All
Yeah.
right, so let me go to Thomas, because I'm like, really the question is it like, if you do, is it worse to do bad but advocate for good, or like quote unquote good, or a system that is like counter to the system that you actively participate in? Or is it better to quote, I don't even know if he had slaves or not, but let's say he didn't, Alexander Hamilton, or not participate but advocate for a system that would magnify that on large? And that's kind of what I feel like. So Thomas Jefferson, states' rights. Jefferson prioritized the rights and autonomy of individual states, fearing that a strong central government would lead to tyranny. An agrarian society, he idealized an America of independent farmers, believing in fostered virtue, liberty, and a connection to the land. Limited government. Jefferson favored a more limited role for federal government, emphasizing individual liberties and strict interpretation of the Constitution. 4. He favored an alliance with France, which supported the U.S. during the Revolution, and he generally favored a more isolationist approach. Let's see. The last thing I want to say is, in the reason why the Jefferson model of America is kind of like what we hear about America, or maybe this is just in Virginia, is because after the 80s, I'm sorry, after the election of 1800, and also Alexander Hamilton died in a duel, the many people shifted away from that way of thinking, and it wasn't until like the Whig Party came later on, and then Whig turned and partnered with the Republican Party against the Democratic Party. The Republicans came over, and that's when they established a lot of these larger things with federal power that we see now in the Constitution. And then, but I just believe like a lot of the people in my generation, what are they trying to do? Trying to work from home. They're trying to get farms. They're trying to settle down. They want to have space. We don't want to do these wars. We don't want to have like, we should have real currency, not based off of like, fiat currency. And like, there's
Like
a
a government that represents you and supports you, because so much of the federal system now is believed not, I mean, now we talk about it, but really, I mean, the federal system was not built to necessarily protect and take care of disenfranchised people. In so many ways, now we're seeing our entire system, our entire government, everything the way it was presented, everything about it was meant to support people with money and white people with money.
I think the people,
Let's just say white men with money.
yeah, so it's like if you're gonna start a prison system, right? So the Civil War's over, now you've created this amendment that still allows slavery to happen if you're in prison. Who are the people who own prisons? Or who would be the person that would have the facilities to house large amounts of human beings? Already slave owners. And then like, so there was a huge pipeline between slavery and the military state. And then this is kind of what I'm leading to. It's like, I think that there were several United States. Even people think the Constitution was a coup. People feel like because the Declaration of Independence was written and there's Articles of Confederation. So I think that was really more Jeffersonian, which was like, we don't need to have a strong government because it'll eventually turn into this thing that can do terrible things around the world. And because the Europeans are in, like the British specifically, they're interested in world conquest. So like we can't get involved in those affairs. So that is like a huge element of it, I would say. Now, so let's go forward.
One interesting thing about you and I is my teacher, my history teacher, she was from the North. And so she is a big fan of like Northern sentiments, Northern beliefs. Also, very much of the like John Adams uh sort of camp of thinking. And
Mm.
so it's interesting. Like I've always loved our conversations about history because it really gives you, first of all, I learned history, what,
Yeah.
20 years before you.
Hmm.
And then the history that I was taught was so sort of like Northern dictated, which
Mm.
is really interesting too, as opposed to kind of like more influenced by also, because if you grew up in Virginia, I mean, Thomas Jefferson is God. Like people do not kid around about Thomas Jefferson
Oh
in
no.
this state. But we were always a little bit criticized him or was a little suspicious of him because he was Southern and because he had slaves and because he wasn't John Adams and he wasn't.
And you know what's so like to a Southern person that just sounds so crazy. Like because like for example, like you take the Civil War, like the pe the most rate. I'm not even the Civil War. I'm gonna say today, people in the North are not like people in, I'll say like more liberal cities and liberal states. They're the most racialist. Like
Mm.
like in 2025, maybe not 10 years ago, but like today, like for sure, these are the people that like come up to you and they're like, oh, like now they're gonna tell me about every dreadhead they've met. When like a typically like a person from the South wouldn't do that. Like
Well, it doesn't occur
so
to you because honestly, like, I mean, my mom was raised in the Midwest and she will
yeah,
talk about all the time how she had one black person in her high school.
yeah.
And she talks about it like it's a thing. And we're like, we were raised in the South, like, okay, that's why are you even talking about the fact that
Yeah,
you didn't meet a black person until you were 16? But that's how the Midwest was. That is how much of the country still is.
100%.
And so it's like when people are, I mean, granted, there's other things like, lots of Mexicans and
Yeah.
Latinx moving into different parts of the country, and there's a lot of racism against them. However, I'm always surprised also, while there is really deep-rooted racism in the South, there's also a sense of living together that's
Hmm.
existed for a really long time. So when I see even a lot of racial tensions that happen around the country and a lot of stuff that's happening, even though we know that there is some pretty severe racism in our county, for the most part, everybody's just doing what they do. Going to
Yeah, and like
in the same grocery stores, like hanging, like, there's a little bit of separatism that still happens, certainly, but
mm,
there's also a lot of intermarriage. So we have like a lot of intermarriage in our county. And so there's a lot of interracial marriages. So there's just a sense of like we're all just kind of living together.
yeah,
And I don't see that in New York. Like when I was
no,
in New York, I was shocked by how much like separatism there was.
like
When coming from the South, I was like, wait, we're all just sort of harmonizing and just existing together.
yeah. I mean, there's certainly racist kids, and this is what I was trying to get about, like the trans thing. I think trans is this generation's to help balance the relationship between the masculine and the feminine, and kind of like reset things. I think that my generation was the same thing with like black kids in like white space. Like I said earlier, I was like the main predominant culture throughout most of my life was black culture, like and the beauty standards were set by black women, like Kim Kardashian. All of her standards were like, you got to get this thicker, you got to get that fatter, you have to. And when we were, even when I was young, like 12, when I was figuring out about these sex symbols, like it was in to be thin as a board, low V cut, not V cut, but low rising George, not George, jeggings. Like that was the kind of stuff that was like thong showing up off the side, like that was a style of sexy, but that was like that thin style, and like so what I think ends up happening is that like they're the elders and then they have kids, and like even in my particular, I'm kind of the reverse. My mom was from Brooklyn. She didn't really meet white people till high school. Like, and they used to like make fun of white kids, and like because they were so insulated from white kids that like that wasn't really, you know, that wasn't really even a thing. So like even for her and for my grandmother who ended up living with us later, it was like my lifestyle growing up in Stafford and being beloved by all these white folk and having all these white friends that were my age, and me being like, no, mom, we're just people to each other. Like we're not living like in the news like how the adults are, but we're kind of in a different space. We just love each other and accept each other for who we are. Like yeah, some parents are racist and they pass those on to their kids. Like I even had friends that would be like, yeah, my dad like doesn't mind me hanging around with you because he knows that you like get good grades. Like as in like usually he wouldn't want me around black kids. Like I've had two girlfriends that have had white parents. One was a single mother, and she was from West Virginia, and she was adamantly against me dating her when I was like 16. And she just thought like it would just be like every time I was there, like at their house, it was like she was trying to be cool because she was still like trying to be cool mom type energy, but like she would always just like do all of the like the token things to like she was like, I want to be a cool mom and let my mom have a girl, my daughter have a boyfriend, but I really don't like the fact that he's black. And her brothers were like actually racist. Like they got into like N-word race fights in my school. And then
Wow.
like, and that's the Southern example. But then the Northern example, like that partner I was with, whose dad was a cop, we ended up being together for several, like 7 years on and off overall. And he identified as Italian. He was from New Haven, from Connecticut. And there's that the Northern Hood beefs, the Puerto Ricans versus the Cambodians versus the blacks versus the Italians. And like, he is like he didn't identify as white. He was white, but he wasn't white. He was Italian. He was Italian. He wore white beaters and a gold chain, and that was his thing. And he wanted to gang bang in the streets, and that's why he wanted to be a cop. Like that was his energy, and like that was like the most racially and like racist person because he didn't think he was racist because he's like I've grown up around black people, I've grown up around these spaces. Like I'm not alien to them. I'm from a northern city, but like, yeah, it's way easier to profile it than anything else. So it was crazy because when Trayvon Martin and all that stuff was starting, that was the time of my life in which I was dating this person and meeting these people and being like, I would love to say that like, yeah, I would love to say that like all the guys who are in blue are serving just because, they're good people, but some people like to fight. And I think that's the same thing with the military, same thing with the police, same thing with a lot of different things in life. And that that element of like fighting for the sake of liking to fight, fighting for the sake of like getting resources for other is a dis imbalance or poor way to use like our instinct to protect our young and our instinct to protect the people that we love and our instinct to protect our territory. And like we just got to like take time to identify that urge as unhealthy. And the capitalist system, I feel like, is sort of like a system that needs to eat outside of itself. And as long as it continues to do that, it's going to continue to like trigger the maternal instinct in the Iranians, the maternal instinct in the Chinese, the maternal instinct in the Russian, the maternal instinct in these people to be like, whoa, I know that you guys are interested in your wargaming and your schemes, but at the end of the day, like as soon as you our response does not need to make sense to you. Like, and that's what I found out a lot is like, even I was listening to people talk about Gaza, Hamas, Israel today. Like, people are talking about Hamas and they're like, what they do doesn't make sense. They're like, we have these rules on how we engage in war, and like the terrorists, or just even my entire life, just in general, like the terrorists, they don't make sense. And it's like, and that's what I was trying to say. I was like, the instinct to protect yourself and others will probably never make sense to the perceived aggressor. And
Good
you
one.
you just need to accept the fact that you are the perceived aggressor,
Yes.
and that's it. It does not matter about your intention. And I think Senior Harry Truman, America, a lot of our allies, we're just seen as intruding on territory that is not ours, and then we're just getting met with this resistance, but we're calling this resistance either terrorism or Chinese espionage or Russian meddling, but they're seeing it as, why are there American soldiers bordering our nations? And yeah, so I think to me that's how that instinct to protect ourselves has been kind of hijacked, and now we have President Trump with this interesting energy set where he's more isolationist, but then he's also like, if you threaten him in any way, shape, or form in his own mind, he's going to retaliate.
Well, and then if we swing all the way back around to the beginning of
Mm,
our conversation, sort of about that I-ness, as
mm,
long as you think that you are separate from somebody else or something else, there's going to create this separation in this I-ness.
mm,
Whereas when you can accept that you are not separate from everything else, that you are a part of everything and everything is connected, which is what yoga talks about in the connectedness of everything. Then at that point,
Mm,
you realize by harming them, I'm harming myself.
mm,
And nobody wants to harm themselves. It's still a selfish thought, it's still a selfish idea, but at least it's like the less harmful, selfish idea that,
mm,
like, any harm that I create outside of myself is actually harming me because we are all one and I am part of everything.
mm,
And so, if that's where doesn't really matter whether you're federal or state, doesn't really matter if you are aggressor or the oppressed. Like, all of it is part of our own self. And in yoga, it's a challenging thought because it becomes really, you become responsible, not like I'm responsible in the small way we think of, like, this is my fault, but you become responsible in the sense of, you think like everything that's existing in this manifestation is, I am part of it too, and therefore I am also part of that creation. And it goes back to this idea that the way to heal everything is to heal yourself. So that's why making sure that you're maintaining your own inner peace is the key to, like, all peace on earth, all solution of all conflict, all solution of all otherism,
yeah.
is solving that sort of within yourself. And that's why the work in yoga always has to begin within you, because
Mm,
you cannot fix anything outside of yourself until you are peaceful and solid within your own self. And so anytime you see something disturbing your peace, know that you're creating that outside of yourself too. That is not just an internal thing. And that doesn't just have to do with words. I mean, words are really powerful, but also thoughts are really powerful.
mm,
A good thought is more powerful than a bomb. That was a really popular bumper sticker for a while, but the truth is your thoughts are very powerful. They are energy, and they are creation. And so any time you want to change anything you're seeing on the outside, first you got to look at yourself and change it on the inside. And
mhm,
that's kind of like one of the core things in yoga, is like maintaining your own peace. That's why it's so, Swami Satchidananda would say, peace is your birthright. Do
mm,
not disturb it. Like, I
mm,
always love that, because he wasn't, he was not like Master Shivananda, where he gave all these like really direct, like, you know, you have to do this, you have to do
yeah.
that. But that was one
Yeah.
that he quoted that was like so specific, like, do not disturb it. And so all of these other things, like, we create all this mess when our own peace is being disturbed. Whereas if we can maintain our own peace, then we don't create the messiness everywhere else. Now, the
Mm,
mess is fun sometimes. But I also just want to say, like, also this idea, also like our karmic, like how we think of karma as very personal, but also I think there is like countries
mm,
karma, organizational karma, global karma, and this idea that even like this trans stuff is energetically balancing out something
yeah.
within our system and within our karma. I think that's a really interesting idea. Um, that this is just the natural evolution of how we have behaved as human beings, as a global entity in our global karma. And this beautiful way to balance it out is really, that's a lovely sentiment. I'd never really thought about it that way. So I just wanted to say I love
Mm.
it. Thank you.
I mean, that's to me that is grace in action. Is that because we believe in the reincarnative spirit, it's like we're evolving. Each generation has like a little bit something, and astrological signs also concur with this, that there's larger planetary generational influences that switch and swap, and like the sign that you're born under for a larger planet is a little bit different than mine, so we have a different outlook on things in general. And they say like the baby boomers were the Leo generation, and then you have Donald Trump. Like it's just almost thing, especially with all of this layered onto society. It's just like such a beautiful way to like look at our story with a little bit less tension and say, hey, we're actually are all a part of this greater whole. Sometimes it does help to have a little bit more of like a technical know-how, whatever that is for you. That's where like Wana Yoga comes in. maybe you're a type of person that likes more scientific stuff. So like science is the way that shows you that we're all one, or maybe there's more like esoteric things that show you that we're all one. Maybe you're more materialistic, like, we literally all eat food for the same reason. We procreate. We have certain base drives that drives us all together. And to recognize that, like, I like that you say peace of mind, because there is a difference, because we're saying that this maternal instinct, this instinct for protection, we're not like condemning it. It's just that it needs to be addressed with a peaceful disposition. That, like, yes, you're going to notice something emerge to you as soon as someone starts to check Henson or kick Henson. Like this one person almost kicked Kimber. Oh my goodness. Or like, like things like this. And like, and then your mind goes, well, you're hurting me. And then to just, because it's going to be hard to do, obviously, at first and for a long time. But remember, like, no, 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 no. I'm not in ownership of this being's well-being. I am a steward here. I'm a part of the village that's helping protect. But like, and I was saying this in a previous of talking about pain management, is that we also have an immune system. I like to look at the balance of how we can, like, I point to the body as cues on how we can manage these energies within ourselves, because we do have skin. I would say skin is that quote unquote masculine territory, like quote unquote, that we were using before, a nice uh, simile of it. And what is skin's nature? Skin does have a boundary. There is skin, but it's soft and supple. It's flexible. It's movable. And it allows things in because it knows that on the inside of it, there is another system that can back check and make sure that what you did put in is like is good. And then we have like our gates, eyes, nose, ears, our mouth, the way that we can consciously influence things that come in and out of our mouth. And I think that what we're getting at is that a lot of what we consciously consume add on to like the tension that doesn't really necessarily need to be there. So when you're having that conversation with your partner and you feel like them disagreeing with you is threatening you or threatening your child or threatening your dog or threatening something that's happening between you, if you feel that those emotions are arising in you, like always check to see like where are they coming from? Like, how do I feel like I'm being threatening? How do I feel like I'm being separated? How do I feel like I'm being othered? And then just sit with that and be like, okay, is this really what's happening? Is this person really trying to take something from me? You know, if the mama cubs could talk, they'd probably be like, hey, like, what are you doing around my cub? You know what I mean? Like they, but they can't, so they have to charge. And I was saying, like, human beings, we have an outer layer of complexity, and we have this intellect that allows us to like double check those instincts and see them for what they are and be like, okay, this might be an impulse that's animalistic, that's base, just like the lust drive or the food compulsion drive, that doesn't always lead me in the right direction. If just because you're protecting your cubs doesn't mean you're protecting your cubs in a way that's actually protecting them, right? You might actually be putting them at risk. Now the hunter shoots you,
That's why
you
keeping that
know?
peace. Someone said
Exactly.
to Donati used to always talk about it like taking anger out of your pocket and then putting it back in. So it's not that
Hmm.
the anger is controlling you, but you're controlling the anger. So that protectiveness can come out, but it's not disturbing your peace when it comes out. You
Hmm.
realize you're using it as a tool and then you can put it back in your pocket. And so using all of your emotions and all of your instincts as tools rather than being controlled by them, that's the key in yoga so that you can use these because they're useful tools. Can be a very useful tool, right? I sometimes have to, if Henson is about ready to run out into the road, he could get grabs his attention to get him to stop. It's the same with children. Like sometimes we have to like snap them out of whatever they're doing. But that doesn't mean that we have to lose our peace over it or then that anger has to turn into something. Just even like when you're disciplining your child, like there's a difference between disciplining your child because you have to make a point to your child to protect them. There's a as opposed to getting angry and then
Mm.
beating your child out of anger. That is a very different scenario.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so I would say like maybe like a little chip or trick in the moment if you're having a tense moment is and this might just be me, you might have something you do where you do it when you're frustrated or when you feel like you're in a confrontational space. For me, it's crossing my arms like this, So what I like to do is like if I notice myself doing this, regardless of the scenario, even if I'm meeting new dudes around like my wife or whatever, I'll just be like, and have my arms crossed. I just
I
say,
love the sight of you. It's so funny.
I'm pointing.
Feeling something about himself to us all this
Yeah,
week.
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I was saying, yeah, 100%. Um, yeah. So like if you have your arms crossed like this, so try to just. This is just my advice. Try to cross your arms behind your back. I like you still are holding yourself because I realized the real thing that I've noticed about all this anger, this passion, these five fire signs, this Aries Sun and Aries Mercury, and me. My wife is a double Leo. She has a lot of Leo prominent on her chart. Is like it's coming from that space of love and determination and passion, and it's like I'm just driven by this person. I just like this little life is so tender to me that like it would just break my heart if something bad happened, and that's really where it's coming from. Like from the hardest man to like to the hardest woman in their face, like all the tears and the lashing, like that's what it's about. So what I like to do is put my hands behind my back,
Mm.
and if I can't, if I have if I have the wherewithal to, you'll obviously usually when you're tense, you'll start breathing shorter. So we mentioned it before, but try to take deeper breaths
Yeah.
and really just like pull that chest forward and see what it feels like to be more heart led and more heart open, heart centric rather than having your arms crossed. And then like really realizing like just sitting with the thought of that person and being like, what am I afraid of? Am I afraid of them getting hurt? Afraid of them getting raped? Am I afraid of that person getting stolen from? Am I afraid of that person just getting hit? Like hit to the like there's one thing to get hit, but there's another thing to get hit and then the person that's hitting you not stopping. Like that's a different
Mm.
level of like pain
Yeah.
and like they just don't care and like realizing like okay, what am I afraid of? Okay, what am I thinking right now? Is that happening right now? No. Okay, what can I do to what's the most efficient thing I can do in this moment that'll bring this spot into a more peaceful resolution? And I think it's just focusing on that internal peace, calming the nervous system, because sometimes we try to like do things and act from an imbalanced position and then we fall flat on our face rather than acting from rather than being patient, waiting. Someone said, "Oh, this is the last little thing." Someone said, "If you feel like something has to happen right now, that's your ego." Like if you
Woo,
feel
that's a good
like,
one. Mm.
and like sometimes
Yeah.
you're like, "I need you to comply with me right now. I need you to agree with me right now. I need you to move right fucking now. I need you to do this right now." And yeah, that's what I would say. Opening up the chest physically, taking deeper breaths, and then concentrating on like just the love that you have for that with what you're protecting, rather than imagining that loving that thing that you love getting hurt, which is fueling your aggression. If you just think about like how beautiful she is and how beautiful your dog is, now all of a sudden you're like, I get why you want to be around. Like, okay, like D really is a really cool dude. You know what? Like he really is pretty dope. And you know what? I know like it would be a shame if I hid his light under a basket, or whatever, and let him shine and be in these different people's lives, for example. And I think that's like what I'm working on within myself, but and more generally within our own people, be like, hey,
Hmm.
pause and physically change your posture, release the tension. Some of us pucker up and kegel too, squeeze our fists, whatever those things are. The first step is just relax the body and open up the breathing.
I got nothing to add to that. That was good.
Cool.
I think you covered everything, all the things.
All right, dope. All right, well, anything else you want to bring up or talk about today?
No, I think this is a great way to wrap up. What a great conversation. Our discussion was all over the place today,
Yes,
but
it was.
so fun and fabulous. And of course, as always, like if you want to leave us some comments and tell us your ideas or your insights or, perspectives on things we talk about, we love to hear your feedback because yeah, it's a conversation among
Absolutely.
friends.
And yeah, I
Part
wasn't
of
trying to
connection
offend.
with us.
Absolutely, and I was like, I wasn't trying to offend nobody. I want you to know I genuinely come from a love from all people, and I love the women in my life more than anything else that I can even imagine. And so I know we had some gendered language and stuff like that. I know it's tricky for me to say stuff like that, but we all live together, and I want to just love everyone to the best of my ability. And these are just the thoughts that we have. So Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Peace.